So today we're going to talk about refugees and foreign aid. I don't know how long I'll be on, but we'll talk about that today. So first and foremost, I was watching the Secretary of State today. He was in front of the Foreign Relations Committee and then the Appropriations today, and I know all the departments are going through it. HHS, DHS, they're all going through their appropriation things. And so, but what caught me on today was that, there's this issue with, one of the things that caught me was this issue with these refugees that were coming from South Africa, called Afrikaners. I think that's the term that's used for them. Basically, white South Africans, like Elon. Okay. Now, this has been going on for a while, but the South African government has been trying to take farmland away from the white South Africans, farmers, and other things. Even though it's what did that one senator called it? It's a coalition government. It's, South Africa has obviously changed since apartheid. And so what has been happening is that the South African government has been discriminating against, at least the black South African-led government, has been discriminating against white South Africans. Maybe it's retribution for what they did during apartheid, who knows? But they've been discriminating against white South Africans in a form of taking their land away. A lot of these are farmers, and they're taking their lands away from them, which of course is not right. I don't care what color you are. It just so happens that these are white folks that are being discriminated against in South Africa. Again, I don't know the whole story. I just know that this has been a problem for a while, and I have heard and saw reports on it for a while now. So it seems that the administration has decided that they are going to fast track these particular South Africans. I think there's 49 of them, is what the Secretary of State said. And so they can come to this country. And Senator Kaine, I think it was arguing that what makes them more special than other Africans or other people that are going through a whole lot more. And Secretary of State, if I remember correctly, said, well, first and foremost is a national security issue, and that it's only 49 people. So it's easy to process 49 people than it is thousands. Maybe it was easier to process 49 people than it was thousands. Okay, that makes sense. It's a numbers game. Okay. I'm sure national security had something to do with it, that these particular South African folks were easier to vet through the system than possibly other Africans, whatever color they may be. I'm not sure of all the details. Obviously, there are other ethnic groups and whatnot that are definitely going through more than just getting their land taken away. Agreed with that. I do agree with that. So, and I don't remember everything that Secretary Rubio said, but he had said to the effect that it's just 49 people at this particular point, and it was a lot easier to go ahead and speed the process up. Obviously, they were vetted, obviously. But from, if I heard him correctly, these particular groups of people were easier to vet than just normal folks trying to, get refugee status in the United States. And I don't know if Secretary Rubio said this or not, but I've heard this being said, that also what may be part of the reason why they're fast-tracking these particular Afrikaners is that they will be productive in society, even as farmers. That a lot of people that take refugee status in the country don't necessarily have anything necessarily to offer the country. Again, I don't know how true that is, or if that's even truth in and of itself. But if these particular people were farmers, then if they're fast-tracking them, then they may continue to be farmers, and wherever they may end up settling. Again, I'm not sure, why. I'm assuming it's the numbers primarily that they were able to fast track, because it was only 49. And I'm not saying that their plight is any more or less important than other plights. Maybe, like I said, again, it was just easier. Are we able to, and of course Senator Kaine went off the rails, of course, because he was actually making it about race, where Senator Rubio wasn't. He didn't even bring up the fact that they were white. But of course, Senator Kaine was. But was it Kaine? I think it was Senator Kaine. Anyways. And we know how society is now. Everything is about race and everything else, which is ridiculous. So, first and foremost, we can't take everybody. The United States just can't take everybody that deserves, deserves to come to this country for refugee status. Just way too many people. One. Two, with the mass migration of illegal immigrants that happened over the last 4 years, we certainly don't have room for the ones that actually probably deserve to come here. We have to clear them out first. It's just that simple. And being a national security issue, everybody's going to have to be vetted and, go through the system. Now, of course, with this issue, of course, everybody's crying that, because they're white, they're getting preferential treatment. According to Secretary Rubio, who's an Hispanic, that's not the case. Now, again, I know you can only take the government at face value. I get it. And so a lot of the pushback was, well, why now? Why these group? And, why was all this stuff cut off? Well, it was cut off because in a new administration, everything starts new again. Every new administration is going to do their thing. And in so doing, with the current administration, they stopped everything so they can evaluate what they're going to keep, what works, what doesn't work, and so on. And as the Secretary of State aptly tried to point out, there's 1 million people that come into this country all the time. I mean, I can't remember if it was every year or every month or whatever it was, that are still coming into this country in a legal way. And, so, it kind of muted this senator's point in that there are still people coming into this country legally all the time, every day, claiming one status or another. And so, do I think that, there are more important folks that deserve refugee status? Yeah, probably so. But that doesn't discount the fact that these 49 people don't have a claim just like everybody else does. We, meaning people opining on this, are going to be putting people into categories, and we're the ones making opinions of whether we think they deserve it more than other people. That's really irrelevant. The government has decided that these particular people were being discriminated against and having their lands taken from them just for the mere fact that they're white, which has been happening for a while now, for definitely many years, especially since South Africa has become a predominantly black-run country after apartheid. Even though it is a coalition government, and there are of course white members of their particular parliament or whatever they call it, but there has been documented factual cases of the government taking away land, taking away land because they're white, because they're not, who they would consider the original South Africans, even though they were born in South Africa. So for all that don't know, South Africa obviously was colonized first by the Dutch. They were called the Boers, and then by the British. And so there are many white people who are born in South Africa that can claim to be South African just as much as blacks that have been living there all their lives too. Now you could debate whether their citizenship is as valid as somebody who was black and who's been there generations. Okay, whatever. But they were born there, so that means they are citizens of South Africa just as much as anybody else who was born there. So, it's, I don't know. It's a real touchy subject because on its surface it does look suspicious, but at the same time, to say that it's not happening is ridiculous because there are documented cases that it's happening. And for the South African government to do that when they were the ones complaining during apartheid that they were being done the same exact way when it was a white government. So, they're being hypocritical. So you were rightly complaining when the white government of South Africa was doing the same thing to you, but now that you're in charge, now that you're doing it to white South Africans, you're hypocritical. So it's a revenge tactic. It's revenge for what you did to us. So now we're going to do it to you. Oh, that's hypocritical. And just like it was wrong for them to do it to you, it's just as wrong for you to do it to them. So it's a lot going on in South Africa, and it's a lot, to take in. Again, the government felt that their claim was valid for them to come. And so they were able to expedite because it's only 49 people. Okay, it's not thousands of millions of people. Okay. So that's kind of my opinion on what's going on with that. Obviously, we're going to have to reevaluate how we take in refugees. It's going to have to be done in a different way because we can't take everybody. And the president has the right to, along with the Secretary of State, has the right to admit whoever they feel they want to admit. That's their power. The Secretary of State is the one that gives out visas and can take away visas. That was another argument, when he was crying about that gentleman that's been in the news lately that was living in Maryland. Two court documents that say he was an MS-13 member. His wife filed a complaint against him for abuse. So he was deported. And the secretary, and so because they have court documentation that he was a terrorist or a gang member who are now considered terrorists. They had every right to deport him. He was not a citizen of the United States. So this claim that him and this one senator and others are claiming that they're deporting American citizens. No, they're not. They're deporting non-American citizen criminals. Firstly, they may end up deporting non-criminal aliens down the road as well. But right now, they're deporting alien criminals. Now, if there are alien non-criminals that are involved, they're going to get deported right along with them. And some of that is happening because they're catching criminal aliens, and maybe their family members aren't criminal, but they are, and so they're all going to be deported together. So, wrong place, wrong time. That's just the way it is. And so, as the Secretary of State pointed out, the judiciary branch has no authority to tell the executive branch what they can and can't do when it comes to visas. The Secretary of State has every right to issue visas and has every right to take them away. Just like they have every right to deport non-citizens. And it's because they're violating the law. They're violating the law that you cannot cross the border illegally and that you cannot reside in the United States illegally. That's the law. And that due process, which is their main argument, does not apply to illegal aliens. Due process only applies to citizens of the United States. It's just that simple. I don't understand what these Democrats don't understand. Due process is not afforded to non-citizens. Period. So for them to continue to make this argument and get all bent out of shape and make it and do this little clown show that they do during these things is ridiculous. If you are a non-citizen here illegally, you do not have due process. Due process is not afforded to you. Period. So anyways, then comes the conversation about, foreign aid. All these Democrats are all up in arms over the USAID and other cuts that have happened through DOGE and new administration. Well, they have made plenty. They have papers of examples of the waste, fraud, and abuse that was going on in USAID. There's no doubt, and that's undisputable. Period. And Secretary of State has made it very clear that that what USAID was doing is just going to merge into the Department of State and continue to function under the Department of State, not under a separate USAID. And so they have every right to do that. And so the Secretary of State feels that the Department of State can do a better job, and that he can merge all these functions under the one umbrella under the Department of State instead of having a bunch of separate umbrellas, because basically USAID was functioning under its own auspices. And that we were wasting too much money on things that didn't matter, and that we weren't actually meeting many of these countries' needs in the aid that we were given. So one of his statements was that now we're going to ask the countries exactly what they need. We're not just going to give them money and then presume that we know what they need. We're going to ask them, and then through what he says, the regional coordinators and the ambassadors in those particular countries will give them the aid that the countries that they say they need first and foremost. That way, you can meet the immediate need first, and then do other things. And that when the need is met, the aid will stop. What a concept. We're just not going to continue to give foreign aid just to be given foreign aid, when if you've given them foreign aid and that need is met, then that foreign aid will stop. Sounds like common sense to me. And then that money can go somewhere else. But everybody's up in arms over, this, that, and the other. Well, again, with the new administration, you have to stop everything so that you can evaluate whether it's, in this new administration's best interest to continue those things. Every administration does it. It just so happens because this is a Republican administration and nobody likes the president, that they're being much more whiny about, making sure money is spent correctly. I don't understand, why people are so up in arms over, making sure the money is well spent. And Secretary Rubio, being a senator for many years that he was, knows how the game is played. He's very even-keeled from what I've seen so far. He's very even-keeled. And so he wants to make the department that he's in charge of streamline and function much better. Why would anybody be against that? It's not that the government is going to stop foreign aid. There's just going to be much more pinpoint in how foreign aid is distributed. What's wrong with that? I don't have a problem with that. But because of the way Doge went about doing a lot of these cuts, is rubbed people the wrong way. And I get it. I do get it. I do believe that Doge was done in a fashion that was quite chaotic. It's not that it wasn't needed, but it was done in a fashion that was not well thought through. And I've said that before. The cuts that Doge has done and is continuing to do up to this point, for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part, was not well thought through, and it was very chaotic, and they just went to cut when it could have been done in a much more thoughtful manner. The same cuts, but could have been done in a much more thoughtful way, where you are still making cuts and still getting rid of the fraud, waste, and abuse, and all these things that you're finding, but done in a much more thoughtful and much more thoughtful and unchaotic way. Because a lot of stuff that's been happening has been so chaotic. All these departments are trying to scramble to figure out how they're going to do all this, and things are happening, and people are, this is happening with people, and that's happening with people, and people telling the executive branch saying that we're going to do these RIFs and we're going to get rid of all that. They have every right to do that. They have every right to do that. But it could have been done in a much more thoughtful way. The same cuts could have been done in a much more thoughtful way, in my opinion, and you still could have gotten the same results. But that's neither here nor there now. What's done is done. Elon's on his way out. They're going to put somebody else in charge of Doge, so they can't So they can't continue to blame Elon for this, that, and the other because he's no longer going to be in charge of it. Somebody else will be. And so we'll see if they treat this new person any differently than they did Elon. But it was just a lot to unpack, and I wish I'd have remembered better the details. Just a lot to unpack in the testimony that the Secretary of State gave today. It was just a lot, and I think a lot of it is overblown. A lot of it is media hype. A lot of it is fake. A lot of it is overblown. The Secretary of State was ready for it. For the most part, he was very calm in how he answered all the questions, even to the point to where one senator's like, "I wish I didn't vote for you now," which is very disrespectful and rude. And the chairman had to correct him on that. We don't go that route. We don't treat people like that. You can disagree, but literally was telling him it's his fault that people died, and I mean they just went totally off the rails, and that's just for show. They do that for show. They do that for their constituents, and almost none of it is true, if any of it is true. They're just doing that to be a clown show. And again, Republicans are just as guilty of doing it as Democrats are. It's just now the Democrats' turn to be the clowns and to spew a bunch of nonsense that don't mean anything and has no basis in fact or truth. And so, it'll change. It changes for every administration. It's a real difficult situation. Are you going to tell these Afrikaners, these white South Africans, that their claim is any more or less important than anybody else's claim for refugee status? Are you going to tell them that their land's not being taken away? No, you can't tell them that because it has been taken away by the government of South Africa for the mere fact that they're white. If that's not racist, I don't know what is. Because when the white South African government was doing the same thing to the black South Africans, they were the first ones to cry racism and all this other stuff. But now the same thing is being done to white South Africans. And ain't nobody saying nothing. Ain't nobody saying nothing. And it's just as wrong as what was happening to black South Africans during apartheid. And many years prior to that. So, stop with all the drama and all the show, because that's all it is drama and show. And let's just say, okay, you know what? Okay, we're taking these 49 people in on an expedited status, mainly because the numbers and they were probably easier to fit. Whether you agree with them or not, it doesn't matter. The decision was made. Let's get on and get them on in and move on to the next group. Whoever that group may be. Again, we can't take everybody into this country. That's impossible. So then, how do we decide who's more or less important? Then it comes down to, okay, now we're coming down to numbers, and then we're coming down to national security and how long it would take to vet those people. That's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter what color they are. It matters that, okay, we know we can't take everybody, but it's only 49 people. So would that be easier to do than maybe 1,000 people? How do you decide who's more important than the other? Certainly not by race. I would hope that's not the standard by which you would decide who gets refugee status. Well, the Democrats think that is the standard. They're against white folk becoming refugees. Even though most of their ancestors, if they're white, came in as refugees. Whether it was the Irish potato famine, whether you were persecuted because of religion, the Pilgrims, whatnot. I mean, of course, we didn't have the same laws. We had no laws when the Pilgrims came. And the potato famine, we didn't have the same immigration laws we do now. So obviously, but what I'm saying is that the Democrats, the majority of them, are saying that these white South Africans don't deserve refugee status because there are black Africans that deserve it more. Well, who are you to decide that? And judging refugee status by race is racist in and of itself. So that's the way I look at it. Again, that's my opinion. I just think that it's up to the government to decide who they're going to allow in and who they're not. And we shouldn't be deciding by race who gets in. And if we're using numbers, then okay, you're going to take the smallest group first because they're easiest to get into the system. Larger group is going to take a lot longer to do. Okay, so let's get this 49 folk out the way and then we can move on to somebody else. But that's not what was coming out this particular senator's mouth. What was coming out of his mouth was, they're white, they don't deserve refugee status. But these black Africans, deserve it more than they do. Well, who are you to decide that? How do you know what these people are or are not going through when their lands are being taken away from them on the mere fact that they're white? So who are you as a white person to dictate who should be given refugee status or not? And what makes black Africans more important than white Africans? Sounds to me like you're racist. That's what it sounds like to me. That's what it sounds like to me. So, I mean, these Democrats are hypocrites. And again, I'm not saying that there are not black Africans that deserve refugee status. Of course there are. Thousands of them. There's genocides going on all over the place. But that doesn't mean that what these white South Africans, or called Afrikaners, are going through, doesn't mean that it's not important for them or that they're not going through something. You're taking their livelihood away. You're taking everything they have and you're taking it and then leaving them with nothing on just the mere fact of their skin color. Which, when it was being done to you during apartheid, you had the same issues. Rightfully so. So it's just a lot of hypocrisy going on, and then these Democrats are falling for the hype of the media that places whites less than blacks in our current racial what's the word I'm looking for? Current racial times that we live in, which I would argue are worse than what they were during civil rights times or during Jim Crow times. Because the media has decided to marginalize whites because other ethnicities have been marginalized so long now. Oh, now it's your turn. Well, no, that's not right. And we're not saying that the marginalization of black Americans was right. It certainly was not. It was wrong. Marginalization of Asians during World War II, the marginalization of Jews, the marginalization of all kinds of ethnic groups, whites included, Italians and Irish during the beginning, during the 1800s and early 1900s. But oh no, that doesn't matter. All we care about is that, oh no, the blacks were brought over, African blacks were brought over as slaves, and we were wrong, which we were, and now we have to do everything we can to marginalize everybody else who is white, to make them feel bad, to say, okay, now it's your turn to be marginalized. So if you have a white skin color, even if you're born in Africa and are African, oh no, you have the wrong skin color. No, it doesn't, you don't count. That's just as racist as people were against blacks during slavery all the way up. Because obviously racism still exists, obviously. But not to the extent that the media is telling us it is. No, it's not. Yes, racism exists. Of course it does. It'll always exist because there will always be people that hate other people just for the mere fact that they look different. That's always going to exist. Always going to exist. Just like there's always going to be people that hate people because they're a different religion. That's why the Jews are so hated and have been the most discriminated against in world history. By far, nobody comes close. And you don't even have to agree with the religion to know that's true. There has been no other group of people more discriminated against than Jews. Period. And so it's just one of these things where, you have these Democrats, and again, it's not all of them. There are actually some common sense Democrats out there, but the majority of them these days, that make these ridiculous, stupid arguments and are forwarding these literal lies that the media is putting out, and division and everything else that they were against when it was happening to somebody else, but now that it's happening to different set of people, now they're all for it. So the same things that you disliked about one group, you're okay that it's happening to another group. That's called hypocrisy. And that's what was happening in this particular thing with this particular senator and Secretary of State. And I'm sure it blew the Secretary of State's mind. He's like, really? You're going there? Really? But again, we have devolved as a society, at least as a society in the United States, to where we're so tribalistic now, and we're all in our own bubbles. We can't come together as a nation. I've experienced that. I'm experiencing that now in the Reformation I belong to. That's 99% black, but they are embracing policies and whatnot that are antithetical to coming together as just Christians, as just believers in Christ. because they're embracing policies that are not inclusive to folks with a different skin color. Let me just say it like that. Well, why are you there? Well, that's where the Lord put me. But it's becoming increasingly difficult to stay because of the policies of the leadership, of the policies that they're allowing, and the policies they believe in themselves that are, one, unbiblical, and two, not inclusive to other ethnicities other than their own. And they have no problem saying it when they shouldn't be saying it, because the body of Christ should be inclusive to all who are believers in Christ, regardless of skin color. And again, all the churches are guilty of it. White churches are guilty of it. Black churches are guilty of it. It just so happens I belong to a black church, so I can speak on it. For some of them that say, well, you have no right. No, I have every right. My own wife and spouse has been on my case because I talk about issues that concern the black community. And she's like, well, you have no right to talk about it. Yeah, I have every right to say whatever I want. I'm grown. And I have a right to talk about the black community because, one, I married you, and I have black in-laws whom I see all the time. And so, of course, I have every right to have an opinion on what I see. Again, this channel is my opinions and my life experience. So you can't say I can't talk about the black community because I married a black woman, and I have black in-laws. And so I have every right to say whatever I want. One, because I'm grown, and two, for right now, we're still a free country and I can say what I want. You don't have to agree with it, but I can still say it. And so I had to correct my wife. I had to correct her, say, no, I'm grown. I can say whatever I want. You don't have to like it, but I'm grown and I have every right to say it. Just because I'm not black doesn't mean I don't have a right to say it. I have every right to say it. Because I have to deal with not only you, but my in-laws on a regular basis. So of course I'm going to have an opinion and I'm going to have something to say. Good and bad. So that shut that conversation down quickly. And coming from my spouse, that was offensive. You should know better. And again, she's allowing external factors to, affect the things that she believes, instead of just standing on the mere fact that, you know what, he has an opinion. I don't have to agree with it, but he has an opinion, and he has every right to his opinion. And just because he has a different skin color than I do doesn't mean he can't have an opinion on whatever topic it may be. It's silly, it's stupid, and it's hypocritical. And I talked about that a couple of videos ago when I talked about, black culture and the N-word. Okay, so it was an interesting meeting. I was watching it, I think it was on the Forbes channel, I want to say. And so it was interesting. I used to watch it on, C-SPAN probably had it on too, but I don't have access to C-SPAN. But it was interesting. And I just thought, and again, both parties are guilty of the clown show drama, grandstanding, the whole 9 yards. Both parties are guilty of it. Both are definitely guilty of it. It just so happens this go around it's Democrats. So, it was, I just think that because you really can't trust media anymore, which is a shame, really. You can't trust media anymore. You really can't. You can't trust the media anymore. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm driving, and these folk don't want to get over, and I'm giving them plenty of room to get over. And so, yeah, I just thought I'd talk about that, you know, with the refugees and foreign aid. The United States gives more foreign aid than probably everybody combined. So for all these Democrats that are talking about this, that, and the other, we give more than any other country in the world. Bar none, period, factual, look it up. And it's just, there is no more giving country than the United States of America, period. So I'm not sure why they're grandstanding and doing all this. They just don't like the fact that, you know, Trump is president. That's all it really is. It's all it really is. It's all down to one person, and they can't get over the fact you ain't got to like the guy, but you got to work with the guy. So let's try to work. Let's try to come together to make this country better. I think it's foolish and stupid for Democrats to want the president to fail when he's the president of the United States, and that means he's president of everybody. Why would you not want him to be successful, even if you don't agree with him? Same with President Biden, same with President Obama, same with President Clinton, same with President Bush. You don't have to like them, but you want them to be successful because what they do affects everybody. Period. Why would you not want the president to be successful? I don't understand it. But because hate is the norm now, especially against Trump and people who support him, and conservatives and Republicans, they can't govern, and really don't deserve to be a congressman at all if they can't put aside their hate and misgivings to want to see the government be successful, irregardless if you agree. But that's the world we live in. That's the society we live in. We become extremely tribalistic, and nothing will ever get done until people can come together despite their misgivings and get things done. Period. You ain't got to like the person, you just got to work with the person. I don't like some of the folk I work with, but guess what? I got to work with them. It is what it is. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Just wanted to kind of bring that up. If you have any comments, leave them below. Of course, be respectful in your comments. I'm not going to argue with people. That's not what I do on this channel. Arguing is childish. I don't argue. If you have a different opinion, fine, great, wonderful. That's cool. That's okay. More than likely, we'll agree to disagree, and that's fine. I had a person that came on here a couple of videos ago that didn't like my opinion on Canada. And, you know, called me this, that, and the other, which, of course, they have no proof of and don't know me and didn't get the time to know me or nothing like that. As I've stated, with every president, there are things you're going to agree with and things you're not going to agree with. It's just that simple. But people don't know how to distinguish that. So for this particular person to accuse me of the same thing that they're doing, which I thought was extremely hypocritical. So they were accusing me of being this, that, and the other when they were being the exact same thing on the other side. But it didn't matter. They didn't care. They just didn't like what I had to say. Okay, we just agree to disagree. And I shut that conversation down. And I didn't have to be mean, and I didn't have to be disrespectful. So, yeah, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share. If you think this content is in any way informative, or you might want somebody else to hear it, maybe they're thinking the same way and they just needed somebody else to say it. You know, a lot of that happens a lot. A lot of people are afraid to say things because they think they're the only one that believes it, and you're not. So So it's that's all I'll say on that particular topic. And again, I appreciate each and every one that subscribes, likes, leaves a comment, shares. I appreciate every one of you, even if we don't agree. So until next time, God bless you.